Minnesota sports fans, we know all too well how it feels to sign up for a lifetime of purple pain. Welcome to Before We Die with Jesse and Thor on Purple Daily and Score North.
What's going on, everybody? Ross, is that another new intro that we have for Before We Die? Purple pain. I'm digging it.
We're keeping you on your toes.
You know, keeping it interesting. This is, of course, Before We Die. I'm Jesse Pierce. That's Thor Nystrom. That's Ross Brundle. We're here to talk Minnesota Vikings on Purple Daily and Score North. Plenty to talk about, guys. Nick Mullens comes to the Minnesota Vikings from the Las Vegas Raiders for a conditional 2024 draft pick. Had started 16 games for the San Francisco 49ers between 2018 and 2020. Basically, like we've talked about on past episodes of Before We Die, clearly the Vikings brass not impressed with their current QB2 situation, being Sean Mannion or Kellen Mond. Mond had 2 interceptions and a 17-7 loss on Saturday to the 49ers. And between him and Mannion combined for 20 of 35 complete passes for 147 yards. Thor, are we surprised? And what do we think of Nick Mullens?
No, we're not surprised at all. We had mentioned on previous episodes that the Vikings did not have a backup quarterback, and now they have a legitimate backup quarterback in Nick Mullens. The last time the Vikings went to the NFC Championship game, they were led by, of course, a Southern Mississippi quarterback, and now they just acquired another one, in August, just like the last time they acquired a Southern Mississippi quarterback. And Nick Mullens, interestingly enough, broke all of Brett Favre's records at Southern Miss. So it's kind of interesting, both the single season ones and then also the career records. He doesn't have the arm that Brett Favre does, or the physical tools, anything like that. But there's things that Nick Mullens can do. He has functional accuracy, and he's sort of that prototypical game manager type. So if Kirk Cousins goes down, they're just going to ask him to function within the offense and hit the open receivers. And he's going to do that better than the two guys that they currently had for that. So it's not the best day for Mond and Mannion, but it's a good day for Vikings fans.
Well, and for all intents and purposes, Kevin O'Connell and everybody on the team was trying to give Sean Mannion and Kellen Mond this opportunity to step in and said, hey, it's either one of your guys' chance, and neither of them were able to do it. Kellen Mond, 2 interceptions, as I mentioned, just didn't look great. And Sean Mannion, you were going to get what you were going to get out of him, which wasn't impressive either. How frustrated do you think those two players are right now that they've got this other guy stepping in and saying, hey, it's probably my job?
Well, I don't think they can be frustrated, because both of them got ample opportunities to steal or to win that job. Ample opportunities, not just this preseason, but going back to last year. And we saw it over and over again. They failed to do so. And going back to the last game, it was sort of the de jour performances of both the guys, like the greatest hits that we had seen of them, just of their body of work, right? Like with Mannion, he had 15 passes, and if you look at his, the PFF charting of his game, of those 15 passes, he didn't have a turnover-worthy throw, which is great. He didn't have a big-time throw either, right? It was the same thing of like, he's not throwing the ball beyond 5 yards, beyond the line of scrimmage. And then with Kellen Mond, it was the thing of just missing open receivers, right? The risk aversion thing that we have talked about, the lack of field vision and stuff like that. And then making weird decisions with the ball as well. He had the weird thing too, where he was like floating the ball and different stuff like that, putting the ball in harm's way. I think he had 3 turnover-worthy throws, even though he didn't have a whole gamut of them. It was a really, really, really poor performance by Mond, where he had, the previous game, he had actually, the first one, he had actually put himself in contention to win the backup job, which I did not think that he had any shot to do coming into this preseason. And he stole defeat from the jaws of victory with this past performance, leading to that trade.
I think what this shows, Jesse and Thor, is that the Vikings probably did, above almost maybe all, value having some game experience in that locker room. Sean Mannion, only a handful of games in the NFL, starts, that is. Kellen Mond, still none, just small experience in that Green Bay game in Lambeau. Nick Mullens has started almost a season's worth of games in the NFL. So I that had to be something that they value. A 66% career passer. That's good to know if he has to step in and play. And if you're Nick Mullens, my goodness, you got to be really excited knowing that, boy, if Kirk Cousins goes down, I got a really dang good roster I'm going to get to hopefully move up and down the field with. So he has to welcome this opportunity too. Not saying he'll even get one, but if he does, he has to be excited about the roster that he gets to throw the ball to and hand the ball off to.
Do you see Nick Mullens playing against the Denver Broncos? Now, it's a quick turnaround to ask the quarterback to learn this entire new system, this whole new offense. Is he going to be able to be ready come Saturday when the Vikings play against the Broncos, or do you think not quite yet?
He better be, and yes. I mean, it's the last preseason game, and they are counting on him to be the quarterback too. So he better be, and yes. You will see him out there because he needs to function in that role this coming season. And just as far as Nick Mullens, I think people can think of him as like, with like with the Twins. You have pitchers on that team like like a Devin what's his name? How do you pronounce it? Schmeltzer.
I'm not great at name pronunciation. Come on,
Smeltzer.
Okay, like
Smeltzer.
And for me with the Twins, it's going back to guys like Blackburn and Scott Baker. We've had all these guys where they're guys like junk ballers, but they have good control and they induce contact, and you have good defenses behind them. They induce contact. The hitters put the ball in play, and then you're counting on the defense to convert balls into outs. That's what I think of Nick Mullens as. He's going to have a really good supporting cast around him with the Vikings. You just want him to put the ball on the receiver's hands, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Osborne, and then, of course, Cook and stuff like that. That's all the Viking staff wanted Sean Mannion and Kellen Mond to do. They were begging them, like, we have so many good players. Just hit these guys on the hands within 10 yards. Like, we don't need you to be Kirk Cousins. We just need you to function, to be competent. And that's what Nick Mullens is going to do. And you get him for the low price of a conditional 7th round pick. It doesn't even vest unless he must be active on week 1. If he is, then we give him a 7th round pick. If he doesn't make the team, we give him nothing. So, a bargain basement price. And again, that's what he's going to give you.
You're asking for the bare minimum, like you mentioned. Let's continue on some of this preseason talk. We do have Eric Edholm of NFL.com joining us in just a little bit to particularly discuss some rookies. But I want to keep with what we saw against the 49ers. More sloppy offense, though. Some drop passes, turnovers. I wasn't that much more excited, I guess you would say. Again, some good things, but there was a lot to be desired for me, Thor.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in previous episodes where there's in the preseason, you're looking to unpack individual performances, whereas in the season, it's more about the team performance, right? And so, yeah, I mean, there was, in this game, there was less of the positive individual performances, although we did have some very notable exceptions. T.Y. McGill was
yes, let's do it. Let's go into that too. Yeah,
was absolutely awesome, and he is having a dominant preseason. This is a guy who has played now for 9 different NFL teams in only 5 years since
just
coming out.
Journeyman, yeah.
Absolutely, like the literal definition.
Definition of a journeyman.
Of journeyman. He had 5 pressures and 2 sacks against the 49ers, and he has had way more than that. Just if you combine the
He's
2
had
games.
4 sacks over 6 quarters.
Incredible. Yeah, I mean, he is making this team, and he is going to be a part of the rotation. What a find T.Y. McGill has been. You also have to shout out Wyatt Davis, who we were already writing Wyatt Davis's obituary. He may have played his way back onto the bubble. And Austin Schlottman had a very good game as well. I had to get that out of the way before we get to the bad stuff. Zach Davidson, who I have wanted to be bullish on, he had a rough one, dropped 3 different balls against the 49ers. That was a tough performance by Zach Davidson. And I know you wanted to talk about Oli Udoh.
Oli Udoh, not great, not good at all.
Your boy did not acquit himself very well against the 49ers. And, when you compare him to some of the other, I just mentioned 2 of the other offensive linemen who, are also competing for jobs, who played well. And then Oli did not play as well. According to PFF, Oli surrendered 4 different pressures. He was consistently getting beat. you're starting to do the now, especially heading into your last preseason game, you're starting to do the roster math a bit. Getting beat that many times was not a good day for Ole Udoh.
No, and I would not be surprised if he does not make this roster. I mean, it really, really hurt him. Another positive though, Jonathan Bullard. I thought he had a fantastic game too. Again, the defense continues. There's no concerns really there, right? Like we continue to be impressed. What do the Vikings need to do? I mean, again, is it still refining different things, fine tuning different things? How do they get better, especially heading into this final preseason game against Denver?
Yeah, you just have to figure out the final roster spot, guys, right? Like, and I think, the trade for the backup quarterback thing, it shows that the head is in the right place for management, that they're going to do what they need to do as far as the roster goes. Because what we didn't want to see is, that they're going to take unnecessary chances, either, trade too much to fill a spot, you give up too much future equity, or take unnecessary risk the other way, whatever. That was a smart decision I thought they made. You trade a 7th round pick, that's totally fine to fill that thing. And then we'll see the way that these play out, these final competitions. But it's really fascinating, right? Like the different 3-dimensional chess games that are going on, because in my heart of hearts, I sort of think that Zach Davidson is worth the developmental stab long term, because I like his receiving ability. But then you see he's continually struggled in camp. You see him drop 3 passes in the second preseason game. He's already been in the NFL for a little bit. Then you start to wonder the other way. A guy like Ole Udoh, he's been developed for a while. He gets licked on in the last game. So yeah, you're just wondering how that stuff's going to play out. You're wondering now, are they starting to believe in Wyatt Davis a little bit more? Could he now sneak in? We'll see the way it plays out.
We'll see how it plays out with some of these rookies as well. We already teased it. Eric Edholm of NFL.com, or Eric, excuse me. I like Edholm. Eric Edholm. Sorry, Eric, joining us. He took a quick peek in. We got to see you briefly. So thank you, Eric, for taking the time to chat a little bit Vikings with us here on Before We Die.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I couldn't make it work the other day, and you can call me anything. I'm just happy to be here. I've been, they've been calling me Ed since high school, so I didn't even blink. So
there you go. E squared. I almost like
That's
E
right.
squared too, right? That works.
Yes.
Great to have you on here with us again. I know you're the rookie expert with NFL.com. Let's start with a linebacker, Brian Asamoah. What are your thoughts on him? How do you like how he's looked through camp and through the game action he's seen?
Yeah, I haven't been able to obviously see him as much as you guys have probably up close, but Brian was I was a big fan. I probably liked him more than most people did. I just sort of felt like this is a player who may have fallen a little bit under the radar. Granted, the size wasn't, huge. I mean, obviously that was one of the considerations for him, where you say to yourself, maybe he doesn't fit in every system, or there's a specific role he'd have to play in certain schemes, but very productive, consistent player, over 3 years at Oklahoma. And, even though he struggled at times to take on blocks, he was a player who I just felt like, with his speed and his instincts, always seemed to arrive at the ball at the right time, and led the team in tackles a couple times. He just was a highly productive player, but one you didn't get a lot of buzz about during the draft cycle this past year. So, I just sort of watched him and felt like, maybe I'm a little higher on him than other people. And again, having not really seen him other than, bits and pieces in preseason and stuff, I can't really comment on that. But, the size didn't really concern me all that much. I felt like he had enough take on strength, enough ability to elude blockers and that sort of thing to find a role in time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it looks like you're going to be vindicated at home if early indications are any indication, because he's getting rave reviews.
Good.
I want to take a flashback to draft day. As you know, the Vikings ended up sort of passing on Kyle Hamilton in a roundabout way by trading down. The trade that they made with the Lions was sort of panned just in a value perspective. You look at the traditional charts, but they ended up getting 2 defensive backs that they really liked, and they ended up getting awesome value. Again, looking at the traditional trade charts, in the second trade they made, a second trade with a divisional rival as well, the Christian Watson trade with the Packers. I'm curious what you thought, both of the 2 trades they made, those decisions, and then also the 2 players that they ended up with, the defensive backs, and addressing the secondary need. in Louis Cine and Andrew Booth.
Yeah, I was probably of the two actually higher on Cine than Booth. Different positions, apples and oranges and all that. But I was a big Louis Cine fan. I mean, I gave the Vikings a very good grade, I think, for their, the immediate reaction draft grade. I want to say it was a B+. I can't remember off the top of my head. But, Cine's production, I think, coming into the last season, a lot of people said, hey, nice player, but let's see him make some more plays on the ball. He did that. He only had one pick, but I think he had like 10 or 12 passes defended. It was a star-studded Georgia defense that can, inflate a prospect's perceived vet worth or talent. It can also maybe hide some things, but those didn't concern me, especially after he worked out and we saw he was a supreme athlete. With enough length, obviously the athletic qualities, he can run like crazy. A little on the leaner side too, kind of like we were talking with Asamoah. Maybe you want a little more thickness, but again, he's a safety who can play deep, so that's not as a big a concern, at least for me. But rangy, instinctive, finally felt like he was, really coming into his own last year, and and especially in the playoff games, I think you saw him maybe take on a little bit of a bigger role. Booth was really interesting to me. I wasn't quite as enamored with him as others were, but there's no question that he was a super talented guy with the right length. Maybe had he run a 40-yard dash, we'd have seen him go higher. But this is a player who, started making more plays as well, too. I would say, it was probably his best playmaking season, 2021. Clemson didn't have the kind of spotlight year that we normally see out of them, even though they had a very good season by mere mortal standards. So maybe some people overlooked that. There were little things here and there. I know he got banged up in the preseason game. There was a little bit of hot and cold on his tape. There's no doubt that, instincts needed to be refined. There were some times when he would bite on moves and jump routes. And, you just felt like he could be the kind of player that you could throw in there as a rookie, but maybe you have to live with a mistake or two along the way. The physical talent is good enough to play. The mental part of it, will come along. So that's kind of how I viewed him as a prospect. And it was a mixed bag of a cornerback group. It wasn't quite as strong as I thought it would end up being. But he ended up far closer to the top of my favorites than he was the middle portion or anything like that. So, once I feel like he kind of gets a feel for the scheme and gets more comfortable, and I know they've obviously given him plenty of reps this summer, I think he's going to end up being pretty darn good. But I saw him more as a cornerback too than a true number one, I guess, if I had to kind of rate his ceiling a little bit.
Right. I think there's another rookie making waves who has basically, in my opinion, earned the starting position for right guard, which is probably very crazy considering the Minnesota Vikings signed Jesse Davis in the offseason. We're hoping that would be his honor. But Ed Ingram has made every case to be the Minnesota Vikings starter. Would you agree? And does that surprise you at all that he has earned his way up into that starting position as a rookie?
It does a little bit. I knew some folks with the prior LSU staff, and they, they always talked about how talented a guy he was. He had some, obviously he had his fingerprints on some of the national championship season. He had started as a true freshman before that. There was a disciplinary issue that kept him off the field for a year. He played mostly on the interior. So there were some things that held you back from loving him. But there was clearly talent there and enough length for not a massive guard, but somebody with I would say, the arm length, the wingspan was enough to the point where you felt like, his violent style, that length, I think good athleticism overall. I would say he rates on the higher end there. It makes, perfect sense that he would step in and be ready to play. I mean, this is a guy who's, I want to say closer to 24 than he is 23 at this point. So obviously some experience mixed in with some really nice athletic ability. I thought he went way higher than I expected. I would have guessed he got picked 25 or 40 picks lower or something like that. Mm-hmm. But the Vikings clearly saw a fit and liked what they saw. I know he did get worked by Javon Kinlaw on that one pass rush move there this weekend, but from everything I've read and, what you guys are saying, it sounds like he's fit in quite nicely. And I just had a feeling this would be a good draft class. Even if it was a foundational one, I felt like the Vikings did find a lot of useful players and guys who, obviously had the traits they were looking for.
Right.
No, Edholm, the last time we did a show, it was at the Senior Bowl, and you did a nod to the fact that that I'm a KU grad by shouting out Kyron Johnson down there. So I want to do the favor back to you and ask you a question about Caleb Evans, the great Missouri grad, a 4th round pick by the Vikings, going back to the secondary. What do you think about his game, and is he a guy that you think can be a long-term contributor in the Vikings secondary?
Yeah, Missouri transfer, or Tulsa transfer to Missouri or whatever. And, he was a player who, probably coming into the year, I knew less about than this teammate who transferred there. And I probably didn't have quite enough of an appreciation of his man coverage ability until I saw it, a few different games early in the year, Central Michigan. I want to say at one point they had him on Plimpton, they had him on quicker guys, which surprised me a little bit. So he's got good length, I think he was 32-inch arms, I think I want to say he was 6'2" or something like that. So, the length obviously excites you a little bit. Didn't make many plays in college. That was probably the biggest thing. He had one, a couple times where he showed some nice recovery speed. The Kentucky game comes to mind. There was one more that I watched on him. And again, Senior Bowl, I wouldn't say he had like an amazing week or anything. And 4th round was about where most teams had him. So the value was, right on par with about the league value. But, even with the lack of ball skills, or at least, it's not like we had a lot of examples of him in college. Maybe that's something that develops. But again, kind of the same thing we were talking about with Ingram. He's played a lot of football. And even though injuries were an issue at Tulsa, when he was out there, he looked the part and looked like a future NFL player, whether it was, as a bottom of the roster guy or as a guy who potentially could crack the starting lineup at some point. But, the eye test certainly has passed there. I know that, teams didn't test him as much as they did other parts of the field last year. And, when you can run the ball on Mizzou the way teams did early in the year, why would you even bother throwing, right? I got to take a little shot at my own school, but
you said it, not me.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not at Kansas's level yet. No, right.
Yeah.
No, but it was a good, 1 year, and he played most of the season. That was the biggest thing after, a string of, little minor injuries that held him back previously.
Again, joining us now, Eric Edholm from NFL.com. Another player that Minnesota Vikings fans are ecstatic on, very high on, and I believe front office is as well. Rookie running back Ty Chandler. Again, another guy that's just absolutely exploded. I think Madden even has him ranked as one of the fastest rookie running backs in the game, which is awesome. Are Vikings fans, do they have every reason to be excited about him and potential ceiling that he has? Because again, as a rookie, that he's only going to get better and better as he develops into his NFL game.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see what he can do. He obviously kind of has that second gear, and you can see that, and the testing speed backed it up and everything. And, it was almost to the point where, he was maybe a little bit underrated in the process and got lost a little bit in the shuffle because, he's not a huge back, obviously, and speed's kind of his game. You might think that would translate to more of a 3rd down type of role, but he was a productive 3-down back when asked to be so, and quietly had a very good season last year. I don't, obviously people kind of got off North Carolina early on, and may have forgotten a little bit. Another experienced player, got to be at least, I would say, he had 5 years in college, so yeah. The fact that he was only really a true 1-year starter. He came from Tennessee where he was a part-time guy, would always, have production on a per snap basis, and, had some special teams plays too, but never seemed to get the full load there, or at least the starting duties most commonly. So it was kind of an interesting early career in college for him. And then last year really seemed to come in his own into an offense that was very productive for Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, et cetera, before that. So, the frame makes me think that he's probably suited for more of a complementary role. And I'd love to see, obviously, some of that special teams ability come out. But yeah, I felt like he did kind of get a little bit lost in the shuffle, given his long speed and what he can, do in terms of creating angles that are tough for defenders to catch up to.
Right.
The Vikings took Asezi Atomwo in the late rounds, a guy, a local kid, a guy with length, a guy with an explosive first step. A lot of the rest of it, they're working out. Obviously, he's a project. Do you think that there's anything there?
Who was the player?
Asezi Atomwo from the Gophers.
What was the name?
Atomwo from the Gophers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I don't know if he's going to have a full, obviously they took him the fifth round or something like that.
Fifth or sixth,
yeah.
Late, yeah.
The length and size were really impressive. It was a player that I didn't get to see a ton of last year, but enough to know that physically speaking, he should be in pretty good shape. So hard to really know. I mean, I would say that the prototypical body is really impressive. The athleticism was maybe a little bit lacking at times. I felt like he looked a little heavy, a little sluggish at times, but I felt like what I saw was that he locked out pretty well. He used his hands, disengaged, things like that. Another kind of an older player that may have not gotten some of the praise he deserved, but at the same time, I based on what I knew of him, which was kind of a limited ceiling, which is why you saw him on day 3. But you guys have obviously seen more of him than I have since he's arrived, and I don't, hard to know exactly where he fits, but I know obviously with that kind of length and would fit into more of a 5 technique kind of role, I would imagine. I don't know exactly how they're using him, but that's kind of how I viewed him, was more of an odd front defensive lineman that could be a pretty good workhorse up front.
We talked about the struggles of Oli Udoh earlier on in this segment, and one player that's looking to maybe unseat Udoh for a spot is Vidarian Lowe out of Illinois. Yeah. What do you know about him? Are you familiar? And again, is he another player? For me, he's one that seems a little bit surprising to have done so well in a rookie training camp.
I actually thought he could be. Was he ended up drafted by the Vikings?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I kind of wondered where he'd go, and I figured he was a day 3 pick. Another player with experience. I mean, he played both tackle positions, primarily the left side, but it's rare to find a player with as many starts at left tackle as he had for Illinois coming into coming into the NFL, I should say. And really not be considered anything kind of special as a prospect, but good length, great experience. I thought kind of held his own and did a nice job there. He was hardly dominant, and it was a little bit boring watching him at times, but as we know, that can be a good thing for a tackle. He just sort of did his job for the most part and didn't do it in a super flashy way. I mean, yeah, the athletic traits I don't think are anything tremendous, but he did well. They ran kind of a zone run game there at times, and he got out enough on the move to show he could fit in that kind of a system. I thought that the better pass rushers could get a step on him, and that was probably my biggest concern. But yeah, I saw him as a kind of an ideal swing tackle, assuming he could relearn that right side. And you have to have a quality left tackle. You'd rather have, I think, as your swing tackle, a backup left tackle, somebody who's had a lot more experience on that side, who can learn the right tackle as opposed to the other way around. Some people may see it differently, but that's kind of what I viewed him as being. And I thought they ended up getting, a pretty good experienced football player who might be able to contribute.
Right.
Last one for you, Edholm, and thanks so much for coming on with us.
Of course.
To talk Vikings rookies. We'd be remiss if we didn't finish out the whole cycle of Vikings draft picks. The last 2 guys, Jalen Naylor and Nick Muse, a couple guys on the outside skill guys. Naylor, obviously from Michigan State, drew some buzz early on, speed guy, athletic guy. And then Nick Muse, the tight end from South Carolina. You have any thoughts on those 2 guys?
Yeah, I mean, Naylor was, he'd obviously make these kind of splash plays, whether it was, rushing touchdowns as a receiver, some stuff on special teams, et cetera. I mean, he obviously opened some eyes with some big playability, but, outside of that, was he a complete receiver? I don't know. There were some injury issues with him too. I don't think he played, more than 7 or 8 games in a season while he was there. So there was a limit to that because he has a thinner frame. And even though he added some weight before his pro day, I believe, I want to say he bulked up to like 190 something. I didn't know that he could, be a full-time receiver. I felt like he had to have some other aspect of his game, whether it was returning punts, being used, in the special teams coverage units, occasionally taking end arounds, things like that. And also stay healthy was the biggest thing. I mean, that really was probably the biggest concern, I would say, for him. A little thinner frame guy, but a nice football player who had some big moments there. The Muse boys were pretty good athletes in college and pretty nice football players. I would say there was really nothing remarkable about Nick Muse in college that I noticed anyway. I mean, I thought he was a good functional tight end. I mean, if I recall, he made some more plays downfield than you might expect for a bigger guy, somebody who's in the 250, 260 range. But, other than that, it was hard to tell too, because South Carolina changed quarterbacks, every couple of years. And I think he was a transfer, right? He came from somewhere lower, I want to say. But yeah, it was the last couple of years. I think you saw a really nice, solid tight end with, good athleticism, but nothing, transcendent or anything like that. And I would say he sort of profiles as a good, solid third tight end if he can make the team.
I love it. Eric Edholm again with NFL.com. Thank you so much for joining us, breaking it down, some of these rookie players. Where can people find your work and give you a follow?
Yeah, NFL.com. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but yeah, I'm doing a lot of preseason stuff right now, dipping my toe into the college stuff a little, the seniors and the top underclassmen, and jumping on shows with good people like you guys.
Hey, we like it. I want you to really keep an eye on those Iowa State Cyclones for me. Hopefully that they will continue to just dominate. Not the Iowa Hawkeyes. Nobody likes them. So
no, of course not. Right. Will McDonald the fourth. I mean, let's start right there. I love it. Yes.
Exactly. Well, thanks again, Eric. We'll be talking to you, I'm sure, throughout the course of the season.
Looking forward to it.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right. Again, Eric Edholm with NFL.com. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Before We Die. However, before we let you go, we have our Before We Die end of segment. What do we got to call it? Our little thing. It's our thing.
Our walk-off touchdown.
Our walk-off touchdown. All right. So, Ross, I know you said you had one geared up, ready to go. Why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, for those of us here in the great state of Minnesota, it is State Fair week. So my Before We Die, the Minnesota State Fair will be a 14-day, 2-week run. It's going to happen. It's only a matter of time. Before we die, the Minnesota State Fair will be 2 weeks long.
Could you handle that, considering how often you have to be out? Like, think of all the radio people that have to be out there so long.
I'll quit. I'm just letting everybody know I'll quit.
There you go. You will find us out at the Minnesota State Fair. We will be with Score North Saturday morning, so mark your calendars, or at least I will. I think Thor's too cool, but I'll be there because I don't have much of a life. So
I'm just out here catching strays. What?
Yeah, that's what I do. That's what I bring to this whole thing. You bring the takes, and I just bring the funny.
It's peer pressure. We like the peer pressure.
Exactly. Thor, what about you? What's your Before We Die?
My Before We Die is, the thing of where the team has extras at a roster spot, like the Raiders did with quarterback, and then we give them a pick for Mullens. In the next couple of weeks, I want a team to give us a pick for a position. We have too many players and we're going to cut a guy. I want picks for the guys we're going to cut before before in 2 weeks. That's what give us your picks for the players we're going to cut.
I like it. Drop those down in the comments. I think before we die, we are going to see, how they're wearing the concussion caps during practice. I think you're going to see those in games.
Those are on. It was like a co-star of Hard Knocks in the last episode. Those things.
Well, and I went to my first training camp last week, and I saw them, and I was like, "What is happening here?"
You were at Vikings training camp.
I was at Vikings training camp.
Hey, thanks for the invite.
No problem. Anytime. You wouldn't have showed anyway. You didn't show to the recordings. You just
unbelievable. Well, Ross hadn't come to the previous one, and I knew he thought we were going to replace him, so I figured I'm
the only constant of this show, clearly, and people I'm sure hate that, but you're stuck with me. Again, this is Before We Die on Purple Daily and Score North. We appreciate all of you. I'm Jesse Pierce. He's Thor Nystrom. He's Ross Brendel. You can catch us every Monday and Thursday. Give it our Vikings takes, whether you like them or not. You must like them if you comment and you're here. So we appreciate you. Don't forget to check out all the Purple Daily content, all the Score North content, including hockey, football, all the good sports here in Minnesota. We appreciate you. Have a good day.